Ωραία. Καλησπέρα. Ευχαριστούμε που είστε εδώ. Η συζήτηση αυτή θα γίνει στα αγγλικά. Να συστηθούμε. I am Κατερίνα Ηλιοπούλου. I am a Greek writer and translator, and I am the chief editor of ΦΡΜΚ, which is an annual magazine on poetry, theory, and visual arts. And with me tonight is Alexandra Büchler, who is the director of the organization Literature Across Frontiers. Literature Across Frontiers is an organization based in Manchester, UK, which for the past more than 20 years creates networks between writers and also brings forward and promotes literature and translation from writers of the so-called smaller languages, many of them from Southeastern Europe and also Turkey, Wales. And on my right is Zoë Skoulding, who is a poet and critic. And she is a professor at the Bangor University in Wales, teaching creative writing. And today we're going to talk about how we think and how we write and how we try to be active in the field of arts and the environment, climate change, the crisis that we're experiencing around us. I want to present an issue of ΦΡΜΚ magazine with the title Anthropocene. About 5 years ago, we realized, me and the editing group of the magazine, that what is really interesting to us is to combine in the magazine two different fields of thinking. From one hand, social science, and from the other hand, literature. So we have created issues that have to do with critical matters of our time. And our research has to do with bringing together these two different fields of thinking. Because we think that the combination of these narratives and these ways of thinking, that is social science from the one hand and literature from the other, creates a more complex way and a more rich and wide way to think about contemporary world. We think that to discuss around this phenomenon of Anthropocene, which is to say, it's a term that describes the way that our relationship with the environment has created a whole new geological era. And it's a way, or we try to understand where we stand today in regard to this. Regarding the history, but also the future and also the present of this planet and of our species. And through this issue of the magazine, we bring also the cultural products, because we think that, and we bring forward this question of what can culture do about our understanding of this problem and how it can intervene into it. And if we can use this historical experience of the archive of literature in order to create new representations, but also new ways of defining alternative ways of thinking about the word ecology, about economy and politics as well, and in which way these literary products can create a field of radical thinking, but also a moral stance regarding these very, very complex problems that doubt the dominance of human presence on the planet. So I will begin our discussion with Alexandra. I wanted to ask you how we think about climate crisis and how this convergence of the fields of science and literature can enrich our ability to think actively about the catastrophic changes in the natural environment. And if you could talk about the project that LAF, Literature Across Frontiers, is running on this subject.
Thank you. Πρώτα απ' όλα θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω το φεστιβάλ για την πρόσκληση και θα μιλήσουμε αγγλικά, αλλά θα ήθελα να το πω αυτά στα ελληνικά. Thank you, Katerina, and thank you for the introduction. Before I start responding to your question, I think I need to say a few words about our organization. First of all, it's actually not based in Manchester, it's based in Wales, and this is really important because Wales is a part of the United Kingdom, but it has a lot of coastline. It's kind of a long shape on the edges of United Kingdom of Britain, and so the coastal echoes, that title of the project I'm going to talk about really refers to its position on the coast, to the fact that we are very close there to the impacts of climate change, and also very close to seeing the damage of the marine environment. And this is something that connects us with places like here, for example, with Greece, with Turkey, where we did a project last year, or with India. You saw the images that I showed earlier. So we are based there. It's a country which is bilingual. That's also very important. So the Welsh language is spoken there and the English language. So that means that we have a literature in two languages. And we involve, so we have a kind of, from that position, we have maybe a slightly different understanding of literary relationships that travel across language boundaries and of translation, and then perhaps a monolingual country. We have worked, and I should say we are here at a book festival, but we work very often with literature as an activity rather than something that's kind of, confined in a volume that's confined to a page. So what we do, amongst other things, is that we bring together writers, artists, to work, to collaborate, and through that collaboration to think about topics like, for example, climate change and the damage of the environment, and also our relationship with non-human species, with animals that are being damaged as well by human activities and the impact of climate change. Now, we have done with Coastal Echoes, it's like an ongoing open-ended project that we have worked on in India on 2 occasions, and also in Turkey, and we are going to be doing a project, a residency with Katerina and Zoe will be also part of that later this summer. And so there are always there are kind of results that come out of this, but they are not fixed. They're quite fluid. So you have writing, you have co-writing, you have translation. You saw the group on stage where they presented the project, and we had 3 or 4 languages there because the writing that was part of the project was translated into the local language. So it's, as I said, it's a very kind of fluid project that connects. It's almost like a chain that connects people with the kind of next group that, or next artist, next writer, who will become part of it. So we'll see what will happen here in Greece, and maybe Katerina can say a few words about what she's planning for the artists, and then there's always some kind of a performance. So it's not a reading specifically, it would be more like a performance that's based on what has taken place, and that's kind of presented as work in progress. So maybe I'll stop here. One more thing I would like to say about Wales, and again, this is really important. It's a country where the government actually adopted a law which is called the Well-Being of Future Generations Act, and this is something that's really quite important, because it's something that. It's a legal framework that runs through activities of all organizations and institutions, where the well-being of future generations literally is the aim, through improvements to social, environmental, cultural environment. So this is something that I wanted to stress because it's quite unique as legislation.
Yesterday, when me and Zoe were talking about our poetry, and whether we could categorize it as eco-poetry, and generally talking about this term, eco-poetry, that and we both felt that the categorization of art is not always the best way to talk about it, and we said that we often think that poetry is a complex way of thinking rather than as a specific completely isolated genre of could you
yes and thank you for bringing us together here. So so poetry has had a long association, I suppose, with the natural world. There have been many poets for a long time who've written about nature, and I think sometimes that's where people are coming from when they're thinking about poetry and the environment. And I suppose in the last 50 years or so, there's been a development that's very relevant to the theme of this festival, which is thinking about the role that our ecological relations play in poetry, how poetry might respond to those, and really thinking about like dwelling on the earth, with the non-human, with all the many kind of physical factors that there are. So it's not a question of humans and nature, but really trying to think about the relationships between them. And so there are various terms that are given to that, and eco-poetry is one of them. And I think that, the key idea here is this idea that nature and culture are not separate things. So nature and humans are not separate. And if we're using language, we need to think about how language frames the world we're in, how that forms those relationships, and how we see the world through language. And that's really an interesting process. And I'd say it's one that's important to me for my writing. But I think of it as a process of thinking. So as Katerina's saying here, that the practice of what you might call eco-poetics is trying to see lots of different relationships, and that being really sort of fundamental to an artistic process. And I suppose that term eco-poetics has been around for about 25 years now. And if I think of important figures in that area, it's Jonathan Bate in about 2000 really kind of solidified this term. Jonathan Skinner ran an eco-poetics journal, and there have been many wonderful writers who are working in that kind of field. So to mention a few from very different places, I could think of the Chilean, the US Chilean artist and poet Cecilia Vicuña, for whom language and indigenous culture and the non-human come together, or Adam Dickinson, the Canadian poet who really looks at materials and chemistry as a way of thinking about humans and the not human. Another Canadian, Stephen Collis, writing about the biotariat, so not the proletariat, but the biotariat, the political force of all the non-human elements of the world, but also including the human. Or Julia Fiodorczuk, who's a Polish poet who I've got to know through Alexandra and her projects, which are also ecological in their structure because they are bringing together ecologies of poetry. They're very focused on place. And so I worked with Alexandra a few years ago on sort of city spaces, but that was, again, thinking about nature and culture and the relationships that we form there. And poetry often has this kind of ecological structure in that it is, so as in the way that it circulates, it tends to be very focused on relationships and networks. And that's really also inherent to the work that Alexandra does, although, of course, it's not all poetry, but that's the area in which I've connected with her work. So in eco-poetics, I think we're also trying to think about interdisciplinary approaches. And so really great to hear about Katerina's magazine. I can't read it because it's in Greek, but I hope you'll read it. It sounds fantastic. And I think too, there's something about maybe for me in poetry is trying to move beyond representation. So we showed some pictures there that we took during this poetry project, and you can see sort of beautiful places and different environments, but we're very used to absorbing images. And we consume images through social media all the time, and in a way, I'm interested in how poetry can give us another kind of relationship to put us inside more complex relations sometimes, and that again is part of this practice. Yeah.
Yes, because in order to think, we need language. And in order to think about things that are changing and that are new to us, we need to change the language. And through poetry, we can acquire a special kind of understanding about the world. Because if we want to be active in this world, we need to understand it first. So do you ever see your, your involvement with these projects as kind of as a kind of activism sometimes, and these projects, as Alexandra said, also have the elements of collectivity, of participation, of bringing together not only poets and artists, but other people from the community, so that this can create a more complex gathering of, intelligence and thinking and action towards this direction as well. And so,
yeah,
what do you think? And can you tell us a little bit about the coastal echoes and how it worked in the way of evolving other communities in the program, in the project?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the idea of activism and writing is an interesting one, and so Arne Dahl was talking about activists as, those are the people who are kind of gluing themselves to the tarmac, and if you're writing a poem, you're not doing that. So I mean, many poets are also activists, but poetry is, it's not necessarily activist in itself. However, there is something going on with the changing of language, the changing of ideas that you're talking about, that is obviously very powerful, and you can tell it's powerful because of the ways that it's often suppressed or defunded in moments of more political difficulty, such as we have at the moment. You can see that often the thinking that comes out of poetry and cultural exchange is a threat in quite interesting ways. So it does more than we think it does, and sometimes you can tell that in negative ways when it's actually suppressed or not given the space it ought to have. So yes, I think it does things, and I think translation particularly is always activist, because it is, the literary translation is making possible that sort of thinking through another perspective. And so I suppose in Coastal Echoes there was translation involved in that. And so most recently, and the pictures there you saw were from Kerala, and so we were thinking about translation and working with poets from Kerala and elsewhere in India who we've worked with before. So there's a sort of connection between Wales and Kerala that's developed through translation, and so that's it's a kind of remapping as well that is. I think it actually changes spaces by making new social connections between writers and literatures. So it was great on the most recent occasion to reconnect with Anita Tampi and Sampurna Chatterjee. Both poets who have this kind of relation with Wales, and then we were spending time really thinking about what we brought with us in terms of questions about the coast and about marine environments. So I was thinking about what Alexandra just mentioned in relation to Wales, the challenges that we face there, and we were trying to think about how we could then understand the situation in Kerala, which of course is a difficult thing to do in a short space of time. It's very, very complex. So we were there as artists and bringing a kind of reflective practice to that space. And so it was Katerina and Katrin Menai, who is a Welsh artist and poet, who also works through the Welsh language, and Montenegro Fisher, who they have a very interesting practice. They are a kind of a collective of two, a UK-Chilean poetry art collective, and they work a lot with performance, visual, sound. And we were thinking about what we discovered in this space, which was some of it very immediately visible. So we were noticing, for example, the kind of the plastic pollution that was everywhere. We were noticing that the fishing communities there were really struggling. And we were watching them bring in their nets and really not catching very many fish. And this was something that, as Alexandra mentioned, there were kind of different phases of this project. So it was something that had also been looked at the previous year. And so I was there on the second of these visits. And we had with us another Welsh writer, Iestyn Tyne. And he was bringing a perspective from Wales, which was thinking about the kind of the diminishing of a language and culture because of the loss of marine industries. And so the Welsh language, very associated with sort of coastal communities, perhaps getting squeezed out by tourism in Wales. And then he was seeing these fishermen in Kerala and seeing their communities threatened by the loss of their fishing industry. So some of what was happening was observation, talking to people, and also trying to find out about some of the more practical things, because you're asking about, what is the actual activism, some of the more practical things that were happening. And so we made contact with an organisation called Positive Change for Marine Life, and they were working in a fishing community in Kerala, which was close to where a huge new port has been built. And they've had a real kind of loss of income, and what they were doing was helping the local people to collect plastics, to sort plastics and recycle them, and so to provide alternative means of income, and but also to make their village generally a better place to be. Okay, so that's what they were doing. What we were doing was, I suppose, reflecting on that through our own artwork, which was it was in part to do with performance. It was also looking at the materials on the beach. So one really very simple thing that we did was what was most instinctive was walk along the beach and pick up plastic. And I think that you saw a picture of that earlier on. And the thing is that, we go there as who we are, what we look like. I think it's not the case that we can tell people not to drop plastic. This is that might seem like a kind of activist gesture, but in fact it's simply it wouldn't be possible. And what we ended up doing was gathering plastic, looking at it, and actually trying to think about our relationship with plastic. And I think you can look at a question like waste, and you can you can think, oh, I know this is terrible, there are no systems for dealing with this. But then actually we're dealing with a question of mass consumerism, with these bigger questions of capitalism and our place in it, our desire to have things all kind of wrapped up and sealed, and then, you know, the wrappers and seals go off and get eaten by fish or tangled up with fish. So in a way, we went to look at a place, but we ended up looking at ourselves, and that is ultimately the activism that we're really capable, I think, of achieving.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zoe, for this account. And while you were talking, I was thinking that as we become more and more alienated from this world because of the way of our lives, we realize that we are in need of words through poetry in order to reconnect with the world. So another thing that poetry does is that it insists on this, on the connection. And in order to connect, it's not something that happens automatically, because it doesn't really happen. So the relationship that we have with other people, but also with the world, needs some kind of deep work in order to happen. It's not there. It's not available. The world is not available to us. Representations of the world are available to us, and spectacle is available to us. But in order to have a real connection, we have to work. And we have to work towards this direction, and poetry is a way to go there, because we need words to praise this world, and we need words to weep for this world that is destructive. It's going towards destruction, and we see all this. We experience the loss of beauty, the loss of nature, the loss of ecological systems constantly. But in order to participate, we need this alternative narrative that poetry gives us, and that's sort of part of what happened to us as an experience there. And I think that it's very bold and quite ecological way of organizing things by LAF. The fact that you, with your project, you embrace and you insist on the process and not so much on the finished product, because the process has the experience. It gives time to the real experience of these things. And the things that surface, there are things that there is an outcome, because there are films and performances and poems, but behind this is the whole mountain of the process that I think it's very important.
I think this is one of the important aspects of how we work, that we really, as I use the word open-ended, and it's really important not to prescribe every step of the project. We're working on another project now, preparing another project which will take place in the autumn, and it's with a culture that I don't know much about, and what happens there is that I'm being constantly asked to say exactly what will happen every minute, and it's really difficult. I can't work like that. So, bringing people together really is as much as we can do, and giving them the opportunity and the kind of possibility to work together in a certain context. And then maybe what we didn't mention is that we also go to schools or universities, colleges, and that's where we interact with students, and that's where I suppose we hope that what they hear, what they see, what they witness will make them think in a different way, hopefully, and look at the world around them in differently. Again, this is as much as we can plan. We plan where we're going to be, vaguely who we're going to be interacting with, and then there may be a visit planned, or we work with a festival. Festivals are extremely important, and we're really very happy to be here and to have this opportunity to talk about the project. But it's always just maybe presenting just one part of it, and this is what you did there as well. Yeah.
So we talked about the outcomes and what we have created, and maybe closing this discussion, we could hear some poems from Zoe, if you want, and one from me as well. Okay. And just before, to inform you that the Coastal Echoes will continue in Greece in the fall in a 5-day working workshop and researching. Again, a marine place, a coastal place in Peloponnese that has a beauty, archaeology, but also very severe archaeological problems, and ecological problems, because unfortunately, we are in this moment now that everything around us is in danger. Every kind of balance is really threatened. So, and then we will have a presentation and performance in Athens in September.
Okay. So, do you want to read?
Yeah. Yes. So, I don't have a translation, but here it is. So. And so where we were staying in Kerala, there was a titanium dioxide factory. So, swimming event. Cover your skin with titanium dioxide to form a mineral layer against the sun. Spend a long time staring at the surface glitter of the sea. Observe the sand, crow-feathered with ilmenite black. Walk slowly into the water, paying attention to its temperature relative to your blood, noticing the prickling sensation on your skin and the absence to your left and right of anchovy shoals or silver moony flicking by. Imagine that your body is a titanium dioxide factory producing high-quality TiO2, which has desirable properties such as high photocatalytic activity, strong light absorption, and excellent dispersion for consistent optical performance. Imagine you were releasing pools of oil and acid into the water. You are not imagining this. Imagine you were a fish and swim away quickly. Realize you can't, because you are both factory and fish. Okay, and so thinking about the plastics. So we were watching the villagers sorting plastics into the 7 different types of plastics. And it's very useful to know what these are. So I wrote a poem for each one of them. I won't read all 7, but I'll just read 2. So these are 2 of the 7 plastic types. Polyethylene terephthalate. What looks like water is a shell around the water, protecting it from foreign bodies, air and time, one thing inside another, named and sealed. What wouldn't you give for such clarity, outlasting death, not to mention love and its confusions? See how it magnifies what's behind it, so obvious it's barely there. High-density polyethylene. Wipe down is a clean wish, all aspirational glimmering doll face, capped and contained as gleaming surfaces in luminous germ-kill laser shine. There's a fine line of objection where what's cast out is made of adjectives thrown back. What it says on the bottle is deadly, beautiful, harmful to pets, silky and strong.
Thank you, Zoe.
So we would like to thank our okay, sorry. Okay, all right, back.
Θα σας διαβάσω ένα ποίημα στα ελληνικά από το βιβλίο μου «Μια φορά κάθε τοπίο και ολότελα» και την ενότητα Νότος. Δυστυχώς είναι πάντα επίκαιρο, ειδικά το καλοκαίρι, αλλά το ποίημα λέγεται «Φωτιά». Είναι και κυριολεκτικό και μεταφορικό αυτό. «Όσπερ σάρμα εκεί και χυμένον ο κάλιστος κόσμος». Ηράκλειτος. Φωτιά. Έκαιγε το βουνό για μέρες. Τσιμέντο, γυαλί και ασημένια άσφαλτος ρευστή. Μέταλλα πυρωμένα. Διπλή πυράνα αναβλύζει του Αυγούστου. Καίγονταν τα ελάφια. Οι σκούρες λόχμες της δροσιάς στραγγίξαν. Να φύγουμε, να πάμε αλλού. Σε μια κρυψώνα. Σε ενός άλλου βουνού την αγκαλιά, σε τόπο αλόβητο από το κακό. Η φωτιά αθέατη κύκλωσε την πόλη. Λεπτές νυφάδες τάχτης καλύψανε τα βλέφαρα και τα καπό των αυτοκινήτων. Πέφτει στα μαλλιά μας μιας ποδός, εκεί που αμέριμνοι πίνουμε το κρασί μας. Το επικείμενο παρανάλωμα, βαθιά τρεμούλα ερωτική, η δόξα του καλοκαιριού φόβος και λύτρωση. Η καταστροφή συμβαίνει. Εμείς καταδικασμένοι συνεχίζουμε τις ασχολίες μας. Ένα διαπασόν, μια ήσυχη διαρκής κραυγή, απλώνεται υπόκοφη κάτω από τις τριαμβευτικές άλπιγγες της φωτιάς. Γιατί δεν βγαίνουμε όλοι από τα σπίτια μας να λείψουμε το πρόσωπο με στάχτη, να πάμε οικέτες στο βουνό να κλάψουμε για την απώλεια? Ποιο θα είναι αλήθεια το συμβάν? Ποια θα είναι η κέρια στιγμή? Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που ήσασταν μαζί μας σήμερα. Αλεξάνδρα, you want to...
Well, I just wanted to thank you too. I wanted to thank our audience and our funders and supporters and ΦΡΜΚ as a partner and Katerina, of course. And I would like to thank the interpreters. I don't know whether anyone was listening to the to the Greek translation, but a big thanks to them, because sometimes people forget to thank them. And of course, we wouldn't understand each other without translators, without interpreters. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.